In our modern, fast-paced world, we are constantly bombarded by opinions, judgments, and criticisms. Every single day, we walk into potential minefields of human interaction. It could be a passive-aggressive comment from a colleague during a morning meeting. It could be an overly critical remark from a family member over dinner. Or perhaps it is the toxic, anonymous vitriol found in the comment sections of social media. When faced with these verbal assaults, our natural biological instinct is to fight back. Our heart rate increases, our muscles tense up, and an intense surge of defensive energy rushes through our veins. We want to protect our ego. We want to strike back with equal or greater force. We want to win the argument. But ask yourself honestly, when was the last time a heated, emotionally driven argument actually left you feeling fulfilled, peaceful, or victorious? More often than not, reacting impulsively to criticism drains our energy, ruins our day, and fractures our relationships. We hand over the keys to our emotional well-being to the very person who attacked us. By reacting, we allow their hostility to dictate our internal state. But what if there was another way, a way to walk through the storms of human conflict completely untouched? Over 2,000 years ago, the ancient Stoic philosophers developed a radical, highly practical framework for navigating difficult conversations without ever losing their composure. Stoicism is not about suppressing your emotions or becoming a cold, unfeeling robot. Rather, it is an operating system for human excellence, designed to help us maintain deep inner peace, clarity, and dignity in the face of adversity. The core foundation of Stoic philosophy rests upon a concept known as the dichotomy of control. As the great philosopher Epictetus famously wrote in his Enchiridion, "Some things are in our control and others not. Things in our control are opinion, pursuit, desire, aversion, and in a word, whatever are our own actions. Things not in control are body, property, reputation, command, and in one word, whatever are not our own actions." When applied to difficult conversations, this principle reveals a profound truth. You cannot control what other people say to you. You cannot control their tone, their biases, their anger, or their unfair judgments. Attempting to do so is a futile waste of energy that leads straight to frustration. However, you have absolute, total control over your own reactions, your internal judgments, and your behavior. In this video, we are going to explore 7 practical, philosophically grounded responses to handle difficult conversations and criticism with absolute poise. These are not clever comebacks designed to win petty arguments or destroy your opponent. Instead, they are strategic psychological shields meant to preserve your inner peace. They are tools of high emotional intelligence that transform potential conflicts into opportunities for personal mastery. Let us dive deep into the wisdom of the Stoics and learn how to master the art of the unbothered mind. Response 1: I may be wrong. Let us begin with the first response, a powerful phrase that cuts through conflict like a knife. I may be wrong. To understand the immense power of these 4 simple words, we must first look at why arguments escalate in the first place. At the heart of almost every intense disagreement lies a hidden enemy, the human ego. When someone criticizes us, our ego immediately perceives it as an existential threat. It demands that we project an aura of absolute certainty and infallibility. We convince ourselves that to admit even a sliver of doubt is a sign of weakness. The Stoics looked at the world with a completely different perspective. They valued truth above pride. Epictetus put it bluntly, "It is impossible for a man to learn what he thinks he already knows." When someone attacks your position, insults your intelligence, or criticizes your work, responding with, "I may be wrong," immediately shifts the dynamic of the entire interaction. Consider what happens mechanically in a conversation when you utter this phrase. The person attacking you has built up a massive reservoir of aggressive energy, fully expecting you to push back. They have prepared their counter-arguments, sharpened their verbal weapons, and braced for a fight. By saying "I may be wrong," you completely step out of the way of their oncoming charge. You offer no resistance. You remove your ego as a target. You are essentially saying, "I am a human being, and like all human beings, I am capable of making mistakes. I am not emotionally attached to my current viewpoint. I am attached to finding the truth." This is an exercise in profound intellectual humility. It does not mean you are capitulating, nor does it mean you are admitting defeat or agreeing with their insult. Rather, it means you are secure enough in your own self-worth that you do not need to appear flawless to an external observer. Imagine a scenario where a supervisor aggressively says to you, "Your analysis on this project is completely flawed and misses the point." The defensive reaction would be to say, "No, it isn't. I spent weeks on this and followed the guidelines perfectly." This response immediately invites a power struggle. Instead, picture the outcome if you pause, breathe, and calmly say, "I may be wrong. Let's look over the data together to see where the discrepancy lies." Notice how the emotional temperature of the room instantly drops. You have transformed a hostile, adversarial confrontation into a collaborative problem-solving session. You have forced the other person to move away from emotional attacks and move toward objective facts. And if it turns out that you were right all along, you have maintained your dignity without humiliating the other party. If you were wrong, you have learned something new. Either way, you win. Response 2, silence. Our second response is perhaps the most difficult to master, yet it is arguably the most potent shield in the entire Stoic arsenal. It requires no words at all. It is the practice of deliberate, conscious silence. In our hyperconnected society, we are conditioned to believe that every statement requires a response, every tweet requires a reply, and every insult demands a counterattack. We view silence as a sign of submission, weakness, or intellectual cowardice. But the ancient philosophers understood that silence is a position of immense strategic strength. Marcus Aurelius, the philosopher emperor of Rome, frequently reminded himself in his private journals, which we now know as *meditations*, that much of what people say and do does not deserve our mental energy. He wrote, "You always have the option of having no opinion. There is never a need to get worked up or to trouble your soul about things you can't control. These things are not asking to be judged by you. Leave them alone." When someone hurls an insult, a provocation, or an unfair piece of criticism at you, they are essentially throwing a spark. They are desperately hoping that your ego will provide the fuel, the anger, the defensiveness, the outrage to turn that spark into a raging fire. They want to see you flustered. They want to draw you down into the mud where they feel comfortable. When you respond with absolute silence, paired with a calm, neutral facial expression and direct eye contact, you completely starve the provocation of the emotional energy it desperately craves. You refuse to play the game. Let us analyze the profound psychological impact this has on the aggressor. When they deliver their insult and encounter nothing but an unblinking, calm silence, the silence acts like a mirror. It forces their own words to bounce right back at them, hanging heavily in the air. For a few uncomfortable seconds, they are forced to sit with the ugliness of their own behavior. The social dynamic shifts completely. They realize that their words had zero impact on your internal state, which instantly reveals their own lack of power. Using silence is not about being passive-aggressive or giving someone the childish, silent treatment. It is a dignified, conscious refusal to engage in low-value behavior. It is an internal declaration that says, "My peace of mind is far too valuable to be traded for a petty argument with you." The next time someone tries to bait you into an emotional reaction, take a deep breath. Count to 3 in your head. Let the silence stretch out. Watch how the tension leaves your body and enters theirs. You will realize that in many situations, saying nothing says everything. Response 3. That's an interesting perspective. Our third Stoic response serves as a masterfully crafted psychological firewall. That's an interesting perspective. To fully grasp why this response is so effective, we must understand the concept of objective reality versus subjective interpretation, a core pillar of Stoic philosophy. The Stoic philosopher Seneca once observed, "We suffer more often in imagination than in reality." Marcus Aurelius echoed this by stating, "Everything we hear is an opinion, not a fact. Everything we see is a perspective, not the truth." When someone criticizes you, they are not presenting an objective, undeniable fact about the universe. They are merely presenting their own subjective, internal interpretation of reality, an interpretation that is heavily distorted by their own unique upbringing, insecurities, bad days, biases, and emotional wounds. When someone attacks you, they are trying to drag you into their distorted reality. They want you to validate their judgment by fighting against it. By responding with, "That's an interesting perspective," you build an immediate, impenetrable boundary between their mind and yours. Think of it as a polite, professional way of saying, "I acknowledge that your brain has formulated this specific thought, but I am under no obligation to accept it as my reality or let it affect my self-worth." Notice the incredible linguistic neutrality of this phrase. It is entirely non-confrontational, yet it leaves absolutely no room for an argument to develop. You aren't saying they are right. You aren't saying they are wrong. You aren't validating their insult, nor are you attacking their character. You are simply categorizing their statement as a perspective, one of billions of perspectives that exist on this planet. Imagine someone walks up to you and says, "The way you manage your team is completely inefficient and outdated." Instead of launching into a defensive monologue detailing your team's metrics and successes, you look at them calmly and say, "That's an interesting perspective." And then you stop talking. What can they possibly say next? They cannot argue with you because you haven't contradicted them. They cannot claim victory because you haven't surrendered. You have successfully neutralized the attack, kept your dignity intact, and maintained perfect control over the conversation without wasting a single drop of emotional energy. Response 4, let me think about that. Our fourth response is an invaluable tool for preventing impulsive, regretful actions. Let me think about that. One of the greatest dangers in any difficult conversation is the speed at which we react. Human beings possess an evolutionary trait known as the amygdala hijack. When we perceive a verbal threat, the primitive, emotional center of our brain instantly takes over, bypassing the rational, logical prefrontal cortex. Within milliseconds, we say things we don't mean, make promises we can't keep, or escalate minor disagreements into permanent conflicts. The Stoics were absolute masters of breaking this immediate, destructive stimulus response loop. They believed that between the external event and our internal reaction, there lies a sacred space, a space where our reason can step in, evaluate the situation objectively, and choose the most virtuous path forward. Seneca provided a profoundly simple remedy for anger and impulsivity in his essay on anger*. He wrote, "Delay is the greatest remedy for anger." He understood that if you can simply put time between the provocation and your response, the initial emotional storm will pass, allowing your capacity for reason to return. When someone confronts you with a sharp criticism, a demanding request, or an emotionally charged accusation, responding with, "Let me think about that," is an elegant way to claim that vital space. You are honoring your commitment to reason. You are actively refusing to let your primitive brain dictate your words. Consider the profound maturity this response demonstrates. It signals to the other person that you are not afraid of their words, nor are you rushing to defend yourself out of insecurity. Instead, you are treating their input with a high degree of seriousness, choosing to evaluate it calmly at a time of your own choosing. Imagine a high-stress scenario where a client or business partner sends you an incredibly angry, unfair email filled with accusations. The natural impulse is to immediately fire back an equally sharp, defensive email, CCing the entire company. Instead, apply the Stoic delay. Take a breath, step away from the keyboard, and reply with a single, concise sentence. "Thank you for your input. Let me think about that, and I will get back to you tomorrow." By doing this, you instantly reclaim total control over the narrative. You give yourself the time to analyze the situation with a cool head. Is there a grain of truth in their complaint? Is it completely baseless? What is the most constructive way forward? By the time you respond, you will be acting out of wisdom, not wounded pride. You prevent a fire from starting by simply refusing to provide the spark. You might be right. Our fifth response is perhaps the ultimate tool for verbal jujitsu. You might be right. To understand the profound effectiveness of this phrase, we must examine the mindset of an aggressive critic. When someone initiates a confrontation, they are entering the arena with a highly specific, adversarial script running in their mind. They expect you to deny their claim, get defensive, and fight back. They want a tug-of-war. They are holding onto their end of the rope with all their might, ready to pull. When you look them in the eye and say, "You might be right," you do something unexpected. You completely drop your end of the rope. Think about the sheer psychological confusion this creates for the aggressor. They are geared up for a massive battle, and suddenly there is no opponent. You have completely disarmed them by displaying genuine openness and respect. The great Stoic Emperor Marcus Aurelius possessed a level of humility that is almost unimaginable for a ruler of the Western world. He constantly reminded himself to stay open to correction. In Book 6 of his Meditations *, he wrote, "If anyone can refute me, show me I'm making a mistake or looking at things from the wrong perspective, I'll gladly change. It's the truth I'm after, and the truth never harmed anyone." When you say *, you might be right, *, you are embodying this exact imperial mindset. You are acknowledging that you do not hold a monopoly on absolute truth. You are showing that you are secure enough in who you are to recognize that your critics could occasionally have a valid point. Let's look at how this plays out in real life. Suppose a colleague says to you, "Your presentation format is way too detailed. You're going to lose the audience's attention." Instead of getting defensive and listing all the reasons why every detail is absolutely necessary, you simply say, "You might be right. I'll take a close look at the slide count before the meeting." By doing this, you haven't humiliated yourself, nor have you compromised your core values. You have simply acknowledged a possibility. If their criticism was driven by genuine helpfulness, you have shown yourself to be a collaborative, coachable professional. If their criticism was driven by a malicious desire to see you get upset, you have completely neutralized their attack by refusing to take the bait. You remain steady, unshakable, and entirely at peace. This doesn't require my reaction. Our sixth response is an internal declaration of emotional independence. This doesn't require my reaction. While the previous responses are phrases you can say out loud to disarm others, this response is a strategic internal decision, a powerful mantra to recite within the fortress of your own mind when facing chaos. We live in an era of unprecedented outrage. Everywhere we turn, things are constantly competing for our attention, trying to provoke us, anger us, and pull us into temporary conflicts. If we are not careful, we can spend our entire lives reacting to external stimuli, jumping from one minor crisis to the next, like a leaf blown about by the wind. The Stoics recognized that our emotional energy is a finite, incredibly precious resource. They understood that every time we choose to react to a trivial insult, a minor slight, or an irrelevant opinion, we are actively choosing to bankrupt our own mental reserves. We are giving away our most valuable asset, our focus, to things that matter absolutely nothing in the grand scheme of our lives. Marcus Aurelius expressed this sentiment beautifully when he wrote, "It is a shame for the soul to be first to give way in this life, while the body does not give way." He realized that true strength is not found in dominating others or winning shouting matches. True strength is found in mastering your own attention and preserving your cognitive energy for your highest purposes. When you find yourself in a difficult conversation where the other person is acting irrational, petty, or mean-spirited, stop and ask yourself this critical question: will this matter in 5 days, 5 weeks, 5 years? If the answer is no, then look at the situation objectively and tell yourself internally, "This doesn't require my reaction." This is not a sign of weakness or apathy. It is a highly strategic, conscious decision to reserve your energy for your long-term goals, your loved ones, and your personal growth. You are realizing that the person baiting you is simply not worthy of your peace of mind. Imagine driving down the highway and someone cuts you off, aggressively honking their horn and gesturing wildly. You could react, you could honk back, chase them down, and allow your blood pressure to skyrocket. Or you can take a deep, grounding breath, look straight ahead and think, "This doesn't require my reaction." By doing so, you let the negativity pass right by you, leaving your internal state completely undisturbed. You remain the undisputed master of your own soul. Thank you for telling me. We now come to our seventh and final response, which represents the very absolute peak of Stoic emotional mastery. Thank you for telling me. To truly understand how a person can sincerely thank someone for criticism or even a hostile attack, we must explore one of the most profound concepts in all of Stoic philosophy, amor fati asterisk, which translates from Latin to the love of fate. The Stoics did not merely tolerate the difficulties, obstacles, and criticisms that life threw at them. They actively loved them. They viewed every single obstacle as fuel for their personal growth. As Marcus Aurelius famously stated in a quote that has echoed through the centuries, "The impediment to action advances action. What stands in the way becomes the way." When someone offers you harsh feedback, malicious criticism, or a brutal evaluation of your character, the standard human reaction is resentment. But through the lens of amor fati asterisk, that critic is no longer an enemy trying to harm you. Instead, they are transformed into an involuntary trainer, a source of free, raw, unfiltered data that you can use to upgrade your life. When you look at your critic and say, "Thank you for telling me," you are executing a profound act of mental alchemy. You are looking past their hostile tone, their anger, and their bad intentions, and you are focusing solely on the data. You are asking yourself, is there an element of truth here that I can use to improve? If a critic tells you that you are a terrible listener, your initial instinct is to deny it. But if you pause and apply this principle, you might realize that you do have a habit of interrupting people when you're stressed. Their delivery was deeply flawed, but their data was incredibly valuable. By thanking them, you extract the gold from their dirt. Use it to improve your character and leave them behind. And what if their criticism is completely false, toxic, and utterly devoid of truth? Even then, thank you for telling me, remains highly effective. In that scenario, you are thanking them for giving you a perfect, real-world laboratory to practice your Stoic discipline. They have provided you with a live test to see if you can maintain your calm, control your ego, and display virtue under pressure. They have helped you strengthen your emotional muscles. For that, they genuinely deserve your gratitude. You have transformed their toxic attack into a stepping stone for your own spiritual evolution. The path of daily practice. As we bring our journey to a close, it is absolutely vital to understand one final, sobering truth. These 7 Stoic responses are not magic incantations. They are not words that will automatically protect you just because you heard them once in a YouTube video. They are tools, and just like any high-quality tool, their effectiveness depends entirely on the skill, strength, and discipline of the person wielding them. Mastering these responses requires consistent, deliberate, daily practice. The ancient Stoics did not just read philosophy for intellectual amusement. They viewed it as a rigorous form of mental athletics. They practiced their disciplines every single morning and reviewed their actions every single night. Consider the immense, unbearable pressure that Marcus Aurelius faced during his reign. He was the emperor of Rome, leading armies against brutal invasions, dealing with a devastating plague that decimated his empire, and navigating constant political treachery from his closest advisors. Yet every single morning, before he faced the chaotic world, he sat down with his journal and wrote these words to himself. When you wake up in the morning, tell yourself, "The people I deal with today will be meddling, ungrateful, arrogant, dishonest, jealous, and surly. They are like this because they can't distinguish good from evil. But I have seen the beauty of good and the ugliness of evil, and I have recognized that the wrongdoer has a nature related to my own. None of them can hurt me." If the most powerful ruler on earth needed to practice this discipline daily just to keep his composure, we must treat our own daily interactions with the same level of commitment. The next time you find yourself entering a difficult conversation, or when the arrows of criticism start flying in your direction, remember that you always have a choice. You do not have to be a victim of your impulses. You do not have to let others dictate how you feel. Take a deep breath, step into that sacred space between stimulus and response, and choose the path of wisdom. 1. I may be wronged. 2. Embody absolute silence. 3. That's an interesting perspective. 4. Let me think about that. 5. You might be right. 6. This doesn't require my reaction. 7. Thank you for telling me. By committing to this path, you will gradually build an unshakable inner peace that no insult can pierce, no criticism can shatter, and no conflict can disturb. You will become the undisputed master of your own mind. Thank you for watching. If you found value in this deep dive into Stoic wisdom, please hit the like button, subscribe to the channel, and share this video with someone who might need this reminder today. As always, leave your thoughts in the comment section below. After all, every comment is just an interesting perspective. Stay strong, stay mindful, and stay stoic.